my name is Giana, darling. I am a best-selling romance author and voracious reader, and today I am going to tell you some of my favorite forbidden romances. If you don't know me and you haven't read my books, then you don't know that I write forbidden romances and I am addicted to them. So forbidden to me is a relationship that should not be happening because of outside obstacles. So for example, professor-student, teacher-student, like in my book, Lessons in Corruption, maybe a huge age gap, maybe it's the mayor's daughter and the outlaw motorcycle president, like in Welcome to the Dark Side. Maybe there's cheating. So anything that makes a relationship kind of forbidden against society's norms, that's what we're looking at today. So I have a few. One of them is technically probably not a straight romance. It's more like literary fiction, but there's a huge romance in it, and it's one of my favorite books of all time. So I'm really excited to talk to you about it, and maybe I'll start with it. The first book is The Night Circus. This book by Erin Morgenstein is absolutely beautifully written, and you know I am a sucker for beautiful writing. Also, I love the cover. It's so pretty. So it's a really cool premise. It's magical realism, which basically means that it's set in kind of a realistic world, but there are magical elements. So the whole premise of this is basically that I can't remember how long, but like every century, there are two wizards or magicians that have to battle each other to the death to kind of win the title of the best magician. And in this story, there's a female magician and a male magician, and they have a really interesting connection, and it's kind of about their rivalry, their romance, and their ultimate battle. It is so good, guys. Fantasy is really in right now. This isn't straight fantasy, but if you like anything like that, any of those elements, highly recommend this book. It's so beautiful and poignant. Honestly, anything Erin Morgenstein writes is amazing. Okay, I am gonna start off with an oldie but a goodie. This is a book that was super popular, and they've had, I believe, Passion Flicks made a movie about them. It's Professor-Student, and it is Gabriels Inferno. Fun fact, this is set at the University of Toronto, which I did my first year of university at the University of Toronto. So I've lived there and I've studied there. And so that's kind of a fun homage for me as a Canadian girly and Canadian author. I love that this is set in Canada. It's also set in Italy, which is my second favorite country in the world. So if you want those vibes, it's awesome. I also love how literary and like historically focused it is. So he is a professor that specializes in Dante and Dante's work and Dante's life. If you don't know Dante, he wrote the Divine Comedy, Dante's Inferno, very popular cultural references around Dante's Inferno. It's basically, he talks about the 9 circles of hell. This professor, Gabriel, is a scholar for Dante, and his student is a very intriguing young woman that he kind of unwittingly falls in love with, very reluctantly, and Gabriel has a ton of baggage. So if you really like a brooding alpha hero who really doesn't know how to love, you'll really like this. Also, very spicy scenes, and I think it's a trilogy, and it's such a good trilogy. Again, it's set in Canada and Italy, and it's just a really fun forbidden romance. He definitely plays into the forbidden aspect by feeling like he doesn't want to have a relationship or is not worthy of a relationship. We can't talk about forbidden without talking about the queen of forbidden, in my estimation, and that is Sierra Simone. I love this cover of Saint. I have like all of the covers of Saint. Sinner is in kind of like a trilogy of standalones. The first one is called Priest, which is, you guessed it, about a priest. And Sinner is actually about the priest's brother, who's kind of a reckless, kind of charming billionaire, and a woman who is training to be a nun. So it's a really interesting duality that she explores here, and Zinni is so just authentic and pure, and it's really interesting the conversations they have around spirituality. If you've never read a Sierra Simone book, definitely spirituality is a big theme, so trigger warning if that's something you don't enjoy, but if you're at all open to that kind of conversation, it always leaves you thinking, and this one really does. Plus, the sex scenes are top-notch. No one writes sex scenes like Sierra Simone. She's insane at it, and there's so many like beautiful moments in this book. She has such lyrical prose. I could eat it with a spoon. I've said that 1,000 times. She's one of my top favorite authors, and this is my favorite of her standalone books. So good. Okay, another queen of the forbidden, and one of my dear friends who I absolutely adore, QB Tyler. Now, this is a special edition, and I'm obsessed with it, so I'm just showing it off for this video. But she has tons of forbidden books. I mean, all of them are basically forbidden, but I haven't highlighted this one before. And this is a messy relationship, which I love. I love messy love stories, and QB does them so well. So This is basically about, it's a father's best friend, best friend's father romance. So she falls in love with her best friend's father and they have a tryst and it doesn't end well. And years later, he comes back into her life when she is engaged to another man. So it's like forbidden on forbidden on forbidden. She's just like, you know, layering the cake, and it is absolutely decadent. I still remember the first time reading this. I stayed up all night reading it. I always love QB's romances, but this one will always have a special place in my heart. That's what I love about a messy love story and about QB's love stories. They feel very authentic. There's so much angst and rawness, and again, lots of spice. Don't worry, most of these books have spice. The only one that doesn't so far is the Midnight Circus. Highly recommend. Okay, this one is the spiciest one on the list, so warning right now. Sugar Daddies. If you have not read Jade West and you love spicy romances, holy my god. She writes such spicy romances. I love them. She also does a throuple, which you guys, if you don't know, I love throuples. I love MFF, although I haven't read as many of those. They're just not as much around. But this is MMF, and it's set in England, and basically it's a pre-established couple, a bisexual couple, two men, that love to share a girl. And she's kind of like this unsuspecting girl who has money troubles, and she enters into this relationship with them where they will pay her to be their companion. One of the main heroes is definitely more closed off to her emotionally, and the other one is kind of a more golden retriever energy, and so it's a really fun dynamic. And let me tell you, the sex scenes in this, if you have a partner, you'll want your partner nearby because you will not be able to handle how hot they are. I still think about scenes in this book, and I first read it like 6 years ago. It is so good. I mean, you can even tell by the cover that this book is going to deliver some serious heat, and it does not disappoint. It's not as forbidden as the other ones, but it still is, because I think that MMF is still kind of a bit taboo in society, even though a lot of people have poly relationships, and there's definitely some like societal expectations and norms that they have to get over in this book. Okay. Still Beating. It's a dark romance by Jennifer Hartman. This is kind of what catapulted, I think, Jennifer into the upper echelons of romance authors. It's the first book I read by her. I mean, you can tell by the cover, it's pretty intense. Basically, the premise is a woman and her sister's fiance are abducted and held together as prisoner for an extended period of time. And they don't like each other at all in the beginning of the book. She kind of thinks he's a douchebag, and there's definitely some simmering animosity. And then obviously go through this trauma bonding experience together, and it completely changes their lives. And even when I'm not sure this is a spoiler alert, but even when they survive the experience, they're changed forever, and their relationship dynamic is changed forever because they don't trust the world, and they don't trust really even themselves without each other because of this really intense trauma bonding experience. So obviously it's forbidden because it's sister's fiance. It's a dark read, as I said, and it's really emotionally poignant. You will be on the edge of your seat when you're reading this. It's so captivating. I don't think it's a particularly hard read, but I'm a dark romance author, so, read the trigger warnings, but oh my gosh, this book is so, so good. Just a different take on forbidden, some dark forbidden goodness in here, so 10 out of 10 recommend. Now, this is a little bit of a different take on forbidden, and this is one of the first popular romance series that I read years ago. It's by Laura Lynn Page. It's called Fixed on You, and it's basically about two stalkers that kind of fall in love with each other, and serious stalkers, both of them. So she's got restraining orders against her. He also has stalked someone before, and it's this twisted, toxic kind of two stalkers who kind of unwittingly fall in love. It is so good. I don't want to give it away too much. It's a series and it's so good. Hudson is the hero in this, and I still think about Hudson all the time. If you love an unhinged, obsessive hero, you can't get much better than Stalkers. This is a top read, and it's kind of what Laura Lynn became most famous for. This is the really pretty edition of Gothicana hardcover, and then look at the end pages. So pretty. For this alone, you should read this book. I also have the paperback indie copy as well. But this book is Professor Student, and if you love dark academia, if you love atmospheric prose and kind of creepy mystery vibes as we head into fall, this is such a quintessential fall read. And as it's Professor Student, it's forbidden, but it's also so much more than that. There's mystery, and kind of it gives Dracula, it gives dark academia, There's a lot of twists and turns and kind of like surprises in this book. You will not have any idea where it's going. And she's actually writing another one, Enigma, which I believe is set in a similar world to this, and I cannot wait for it. So this is also a top professor student read. Highly recommend. I love this book so much, and if you're a fan of Welcome to the Dark Side, I would recommend this book to you. It is so good. It's very forbidden, and I actually love this. I know that a lot of people find this triggering, but when the hero and heroine have known each other from a young age, this one is an age gap where he's known her from a young age, and he basically, well, first, before I get into it, I'll just say, okay, so it's All the Ugly and Wonderful Things. This one, it was a New York Times bestseller, and I believe it also won a prize. It is so good. It's definitely not a pretty love story. It's kind of basically the main character is a young girl when she meets the hero, and she has a very terrible home life. And even though the hero is kind of not really in a place to take care of anyone, he's not even really in a great place to take care of himself, he finds himself drawn to this girl and to take care of her, like against all the odds. And I really like this story because it's not just a romance novel. It's a literary fiction novel with a love story, which I tend to love. And they're both so real. Like, he is a very real hero. He's not got a six-pack, you know, he's not a billionaire. He's just a real man who basically decides to take care of this girl who needs help and needs someone to take responsibility for her. And it's kind of their really interesting connection as they grow up, and it's all platonic when she's young. And then basically when they get older, the forbidden nature of their relationship, when they actually start falling in love, there are serious consequences for him and for her. And it gets really dark, and it kind of, not really dark, but necessarily dark violent, but dark emotional, and kind of shows the repercussions of having a forbidden love. I really enjoy this book. It's definitely a literary fiction book, so don't necessarily expect spice, don't expect necessarily over-the-top declaration of love, but there's so many little moments where they love and support each other that are just so sweet. I really love this book. And then the last one, I don't have the paperback for, so I'll put it here, but is Fearless by Lauren Gilly, and I've talked about this book so many times for people who love Welcome to the Dark Side. Basically, this whole movie is for people who love my forbidden books and want more forbidden books, and I always suggest Fearless by Lauren Gilly after you read Welcome to the Dark Side. It's kind of the only thing that I've ever read that comes close. It's an MC romance between a brother who's brought in from the New Orleans chapter to the Knoxville chapter to protect the president's daughter when they're under attack from another club. And it spans years. It takes place in Knoxville, in Louisiana, in the swamps of the bayou. Mercy and Ava are two of my favorite characters of all time. They're so wonderfully written. Ava's an aspiring author. She grew up in the MC as an MC princess, but she goes off to college and wants to kind of pretends to herself that she wants to have a different kind of life than she was raised in. And she comes back home with a new boyfriend, and things do not go as planned. And Mercy, the hero, ends up being there, and she thought she would never have to see him again. It's a second chance romance, but that you see the first half of the romance too, and it's just 10 out of 10. The prose, I love Lauren Gilly. I'll read anything that she writes. It's a long book. It's thick, but the storytelling and the complex plot and character development is phenomenal, out of this world, and a go-to book whenever I recommend something forbidden. So those are my forbidden recs now. I have so many more. Let me know if you want to hear a part 2 of my forbidden romance recommendations. And if you want any other ideas, I just did a YouTube about some of my favorite romance authors, and a lot of them write forbidden romance as well. Anyway, thank you so much for joining me today for my forbidden romance recommendations. And like, subscribe, and comment, and I'll see you next week with more.